Ooh. Hello. Welcome. Welcome to this sanctuary session with Raworth. My name's Tom Herbert. I'm part of the team here at Brimscombe Mill and the Grace Network, and it's so thrilling to be here tonight for this occasion and the conversation we're about to have and the things that we hope we're going to glean and learn, and perhaps here as well as anywhere might be a place where some ideas we get tonight have a meaningful chance of shaping what happens next. And that just feels, for me, that feels really, really thrilling. Have any of you been to a sanctuary session before? This is number 3. So welcome back to those of you that came to Merlin Sheldrake's one. That was wonderful. And Phil Dunn's screening of The Stupid Boy, that was great. And there's more to come. But about tonight, very pleased to welcome Kate Raworth, who is the brilliant mind behind Donut Economics, which has been a real inspiration to us and helps reassure us that we might be going in the right direction and shows us how much more there is still to do, but we're glad to be on this journey. And massive thanks. This is the first time ever that we have had a sponsored event. Ooh. I know. So, sometimes you just got to ask. And that's made it possible that we can afford to pay for the filming and much else too. So please, huge thanks to the amazing team from Lived In. They're dear friends of ours. They are working to make self-build housing happen. So we know we need self-build housing. It's what makes housing possible on the continent. It needs to happen here in the UK. We hear so much about housing. There's either this way or that way, apparently, and everyone's ignoring the huge path down the middle, which they do everywhere else. It's like we've got to build our own. And it fits, as you can tell, massively with the spirit of all to do with Long Table, Brimscombe Mill, the Grace Network. We're the kind of people that just get on and do it, and these guys are really making that possible. So massive thanks to Lived In for sponsoring this evening. Couple of meaningful thank yous. Massive thanks to Tom Lawton. Tom Lawton, you may know, is the creator of Wonder here. We are fundraising for this to go on a mission to the chapel in Bethlehem in Palestine. So if you want there to be a documentary about that and see this awesome piece go there, then speak to Tom afterwards. Tom, are you here? Yeah, he's at the back. There he is. Have a chat with him. We'll find out about it online. But we're not only grateful for Tom for gracing our sanctuary space with Wonder, that for me shows what can be done when you pull up nutrients from minerals from the ground and all the goodness that's been squashed by life, and pull down heavenly favour and get them all mixing together. It kind of, what we do here in my mind looks a bit like that. And it's in flow and it's moving, and you can help influence it just by being here. But also importantly, Tom is our connection to Kate. So we've you to thank for that this evening. Thank you, Tom. And also, big thanks to Jenny Bauer, local artist, who you might have thought did all that might be done with this space in making it an emporium of fungi. But tonight we have an actual donut. So massive thanks, Jenny, for your incredible artwork. And the way that you inspire us and just bring joyfulness and help us make sense of all these nonsense words by actually just doing a picture that we can look at and inspire us. So thank you. Okay, I'll pull down the screen and we will hear from you, Kate.
Thank you, and hi. It's a very, very big pleasure to be here. I've only been here a couple of hours, but I feel really delighted and moved by the place. Actually, we just had supper at the Long Table, and when you come from somewhere else and you step in to another place's space and culture and community, you really feel it freshly, and it's something very, very special you've got here. Thank you for inviting me into it. You already said the connection is through Tom. I actually want to say the connection is really through the gift economy. So it's not like, oh, Tom, Kate have known each other forever. The reason we know each other is because I was on Twitter one day when my book had recently come out, and some person called Tom writes to me and says, I'd like to send you a painting of a donut. And I'm just bringing this up now because actually it was a really important moment for me, because I realized, wow, these ideas make people gift, make people want to give to each other. A stranger, I don't know this guy, he just wants to send me a painting because he's moved by this idea. And that's why we know each other, through the gift economy and Tom reaching out. So it is the reason I'm here, actually, because it's the connection. So thank you, Tom. But thank you for the gift economy and the generosity of just connecting to a stranger and saying, that idea moves me and I want to send you something. And then we ended up talking about this, which is, of course, the inverse of a donut. And we're like, oh, it's a donut, but it's the inside out of a donut. So there's something about connecting economics that becomes art that moves me. And this place, I feel the economics of this place and the art of this place, and it's all connected. So I'm really, really delighted to be here, and I'll be sad to go home tomorrow morning because I'm stepping into somebody else's culture and place and think, ooh, I wish I lived here. That's how half of you came here, isn't it? How you moved to Stratford. Ooh, I want to stay. Yeah, so anyway, thank you for inviting me. So I'm here because I studied economics at university. I mean, that's why I'm here. It's a weird reason, because I was really frustrated by what I was taught. I'm 54. I went to university in 1990. And I studied economics because I wanted to learn the mother tongue of public policy. And I thought this would equip me to help change the world. Who doesn't want to help do that? But what I was taught just fell completely short of what we need to be learning about. And I'm going to give you an economics degree in one slide, but let me just first put your hand up if you've ever studied economics of any kind at school. Oh, wow, there's lots of us in the house, okay. Those of you who haven't, don't worry, it got you. It studied us all, right? Economics infiltrates us all because it's in the questions that journalists ask on the news. It's in every politician's speech. It's in every business advice. It frames the world we live in, so we're all floating and swimming in that water. So I'm going to give you in one slide my frustrations with economics that I was taught at university. And I'm summing it up in 3 iconic diagrams. And everything that I'm going to show you is diagrams, by the way. When I was writing this book, I would meet parents at the school gate picking up our kids, and they said, what do you do? I said, I'm writing a book about rewriting economics. And the first thing people do is they draw back. And they go, whoa, I was never very good at maths at school. That's what a lot of people say. I say, hey, in my book, the only numbers are the page numbers. We can all do this. But people are intimidated by economics because it's technical, it's mathematical, it's equations. Oh, you won't get it. You know, it's not. It's not. Economics comes from ancient Greek. It means ekos nomos. It means the art of household management. That's what it means. So whether we're talking about managing our own household, which is what actually Xenophon in ancient Greece, he was writing about managing a single estate. Whether we're talking about managing our own household, a city-state, a nation-state, or surely today the household is the planetary household. The art of household management. I mean, who could ask to be involved in a nobler pursuit than that? We all get it, and we're all part of it because we're included in it. We do it every day. So we need to reclaim economics and make it make sense and make sense on this planet in our communities. So that's my passion. So here's one slide of the economics that I was taught that I think tragically is still far too often taught in universities and schools today. So the first image, actually those of you who studied economics, can you remember what was the first diagram you ever remember learning? I did not prep this, people. But why is it that whatever room I go into, whatever country in the world, I ask economics students, they'll give the same answer? I beg you to tell me any other subject that you think its students would all give the same answer, supply and demand. You won't find it. This is a cult. So supply and demand, it means welcome to economics, the art of household management. Here's the market. Straight in, we're into the market. Woo. That's a particular move. I mean, you didn't have to go there. You didn't have to start there. You could have started with the planet. You could have started with commons. You could have started with gift. Nope, we're going to go with the market. And then because we've got this crisscross of lines, what are people willing to pay to make something? What are they willing to pay to buy something? You get this crisscross, and that's price. And so it means that from day one, price is the metric of concern. And it never goes away. So everything in economics needs to be expressed in price and financial terms. And anything that falls outside that price contract is called an externality. That's how economists say, yeah, it's an external to that negotiation. Which means that if we want to talk about climate breakdown, ecological breakdown, any kind of pollution, yeah, that's an environmental externality. I think this, for me, is reason enough to rewrite economics. I mean, if aliens wanted to take down humanity, they don't need to land here, they don't need little green laser guns. They just need to persuade us that the way to talk about the destruction we do to our planetary home is to call it an environmental externality. And if we call it that, we will do the job ourselves. There's no way we'll do justice to the world on which we depend if we frame it that way. So this deeply motivated me. The second picture is the selfie, the self-portrait of humanity. Who do we tell ourselves we are? And there's this character called Rational Economic Man that is placed in all the models, microeconomic and macroeconomic. And he's never actually drawn, but I think pictures are so powerful I decided to draw him, so he'd have to look a bit like this. He'd be a man, he's got no dependents, stands alone, money in his hands, that's how he interacts with the market, ego in his heart, calculator in his head, nature at his feet. He hates work, he loves luxury, he knows the price of everything, and he can never get enough. These are the traits given to humanity in an economist's model. That's how they model us. But the real damage is not just how absurdly narrow this portrait is. The real damage, and people have shown this from research, is that the more that we tell ourselves that he is like us, we actually become like him. So research has shown that from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 of their study, economics students more value competition over collaboration. They more value self-interest over altruism. Who we tell ourselves we are shapes who we become. The models we make of ourselves remake us. So if we want to thrive 8 to 10 billion people on this planet, and we're going to go around telling ourselves that that's who we are, I think we've got no chance. We need a much richer portrait of humanity. The kind of humanity that actually gives things to each other, that reciprocates, that cares, that assists, that collaborates, that cooperates. We need to play better games than Monopoly, people. We need to play games that are cooperative games that teach us those skills. Because we're actually the most social of all mammals. More social than the naked mole rat even, right? When it comes to collaborating with those beyond our next of kin, we outstrip every other animal. We're phenomenal. And we've got to tap into that. That's our superpower. But we tell ourselves the opposite story in economics, and it undermines us. So we've got this first image, we've got the selfie, the goal. What's the goal of the economy? Rachel Reeves will tell you, Keir Starmer will tell you, Liz Truss told us. It is, of course, growth. It's not, people, it's not. I'm just joking, okay? But they'll say it's growth, endlessly, measured in GDP, no matter how rich a nation already is. And this nation, compared to the rest of the world and the whole of history, this is a pretty damn rich nation. But our economists and their politicians will tell us that success lies on yet more growth without end, no matter how rich a country already is. There's got to be an insanity to that. There's no landing point. There's no arrival point. It's just got to be continual growth. We've designed it into our economic systems. So we've got economics structured on these core concepts. And this is still the mindset that is taught in universities today. Students going to university in 2025, quarter of the way through the 21st century, wanting to tackle the climate breakdown, the scale of inequality, the challenges between nations, the polycrises, are taught these concepts. And actually, this is the one thing that makes me really mad. Because they're taking out loans, and the first thing that happens when they get to university to do the course they're paying thousands of pounds to do is the first thing they realize they have to campaign to rewrite the syllabus that they're going to be taught. So they actually have to do double time. They have to be campaigners to change what they're paying for. And they're doing an amazing job trying to change that, but this should not be the education. They deserve an education that will take them through to be the policymakers, the business leaders, the community organizers, the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers, the politicians, through to 2050. They need a mindset that will equip them for that. I really believe that this very reductionist mindset has really underpinned the reason why we've arrived with so many crises, and this just from the first quarter of the 21st century, right? It began with financial meltdown, 2007 and 8. If you think that a system could expand endlessly, The financial system can expand endlessly. You will induce a bubble that'll burst. COVID lockdown, if we endlessly encroach human settlements into spaces of wildlife and couple that with global travel, flights increasing every day, we create perfect conditions for zoonotic disease transfer. If we keep drawing on Earth's minerals and fossils and burning them, we will induce climate and ecological breakdown. And people have risen up to stand as land defenders, earth defenders, and there's a crackdown that we're seeing on protest. Now, this is just the first quarter of the century. This ended before January. I mean, before this year, we already thought we had enough challenge. And now it's been redoubled this year by the rising militarism, the rise of big men, AI, the tech bros. So we have some challenges. We need an economic mindset that actually tackles this and helps turn it around. So I was really frustrated by the economics I was taught. It didn't serve me, and I walked away from it, and I've never said, hello, I'm an economist. People scarper, by the way, if you try that. And that's what motivated me. I was sitting at home, actually, when the financial crisis was happening with twin babies on my lap, so I was immersed in the real unpaid care economy of nappies and babies, watching the financial meltdown. And economists, you know, the Queen said, why didn't the economists see it coming? And the economists all scrambled to have an answer, and they said, well, we need to rewrite economics to reflect financial realities. And I just remember thinking, I'll be darned, we've got to rewrite economics for more than that. For ecological breakdown, for social inequities, we've got to rewrite economics from the beginning. And that's what motivated me to write Donut Economics. And I read all the economics I'd never been taught. Well, there was masses of it. I read ecological economics, it blew my mind. Feminist economics, complexity economics, commons theory, and there was amazing theories, and I brought them together to dance on the same page. And that's what I was aiming to do. And I've set it out in these kind of 7 ways to think. So it's not what to do. The book isn't full of policies at all. It's full of ways of thinking. We need to change the goal, and I'm going to come back to that. We need to see the big picture, see the whole economy. Think in systems. We need to nurture the best of human nature. Be regenerative and distributive by design, and rethink our addiction to endless growth. So that's really at the heart of the book. And it came out in 2017. And when it was published, an amazing thing happened. On Twitter, which was a wonderful place in its day, and it's gone, but it was a great friend. I met Tom that way, and many other people. On Twitter, people just started posting these photos. I'm reading it up a mountain, in a hammock. My cat's reading the book. I'm reading it with a bottle of wine. It was really amazing that people were turning it into a sort of meme and responding to it and playfully creating art and cartoons and graffiti and making little donuts. And I was realizing it was tapping into a playfulness, and maybe because I stuck the word donut economics in front of economics. Okay, this isn't intimidating anymore. But there was a play in the air. And then it really went on into people have responded to it in ways I could never have imagined. From David Attenborough to Pope Francis, to Extinction Rebellion, to the UN. I would never have actually been able to finish the book. I mean, the weight of responsibility would have been unbearable. So I'm really glad I had no idea it was going to have the traction it's had. The picture in the middle I really like. This is in Brussels. Some American congressmen came to Brussels for conversations, and the politicians of Brussels decided to show them the donut. So this is like Brussels showing America the donut. When politicians are choosing to show each other this concept, it's like, wow, this is having traction amongst national politicians, local politicians, community groups, people organizing with it. So it's blown me away, to be quite honest. I'm often having to kind of hit myself and say, is this really happening? This idea is taken off. And I'm going to tell you some of the stories behind the idea, but also how it's taken off, how people have started putting it into practice, which has been the most joyful, honoring, humbling, exciting thing for me. And coming here tonight and hearing how, you know, the principles around here about regenerative and distributive design, it's deeply, deeply connected of what I was setting out in the book and what you're doing here in practice. And I want to really talk about the bridge between theory and practice and the relationship between the two. So let me pull back. What is this donut thing, right? So frustrated by this goal of endless growth, I wanted to flip economics on its head after the financial crash. And I wanted to be part of a big team walking back towards economics rather than away from it, disillusioned, walking back towards it, but flipping it. So I'm not going to start with markets and endless growth. I want to start with what we should be for. I mean, what are we even trying to achieve? What are we for? Because if you don't know what you're for, you don't know what the goal is, how on earth do you know what success is, other than just more growth? So that's what the donut aims to do. So if you think of humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the center of this donut, the hole in the middle there, that's a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life. And the words in the middle set out these 12 social foundations that everybody has a claim to: food, water, health, education, housing, income, peace, political voice, gender equality, social equity. These, I crowdsourced them from the Sustainable Development Goals. So all the world's governments have already agreed that every person in the world has a right to a minimum claim on these essentials to lead a life of dignity and community and opportunity. And of course, so many of these tap so closely to what's being provided right here. So leave nobody in the hole, unable to provide the basics for themselves and their families. But as we meet people's needs and their wants, we risk not only getting people over the minimum hole, but putting pressure on that outer ring, the ecological ceiling. And that's made up of the 9 planetary boundaries that were first recognized by Earth system scientists in 2009. A group of about 30 of them came together and they said, we think there are these critical 9 life-supporting systems that make life work on this planet, that keep this unique, delicately balanced living planet in balance, as she's been in for the last 12,000 years, this era that people call the Holocene. Somebody once said to me, is it called the Holocene because it's like the hole in the donut? No, the Holocene came first. The Holocene is the last 12,000 years during which Earth's climate has been unusually slightly warmer and remarkably stable. And it's the era in which we then, as humans, managed to create and discover agriculture in many continents at the same time, to trust that the rain would come, that we could plant our seeds and there would be a harvest. The regularity and the reliability meant that we could start to settle and have agriculture, and it's allowed all civilizations to flourish and thrive. So we'd be absolutely crazy to kick ourselves beyond these planetary boundaries out of this safe space. So the goal of the donut: meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet. Leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot Earth's boundaries. And when I first drew that, we published it as a discussion paper at Oxfam in 2012. And again, I was blown away by the response to it. The number of people who I could see felt empowered in the conversations they wanted to have with politicians, with businesses, empowered by having this visual picture. And it made me realize the power of pictures. Right? Our eyes are pattern seekers. We're looking for meaning and pattern with our eyes all the time. And so this changed the shape of progress. It's no longer this ever-rising curve that the GDP curve tells us. It's more like this. It's like between the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. I'm going to invite, just do that with your hands, just like this. Oh, you look lovely. But just feel that, right? It's balance. It's actually health. And it's what we already know in our own bodies. We know in our bodies, each of which is like a little planet, a complex, adaptive, balanced system. We need food, but not too much. We need water, but not too much. We need oxygen, but not too much. We need heat, exercise, stress, sleep, but not too much. We thrive and live and survive because we live in balance. It's deep in us. And I really think this is the metaphorical opportunity of the century, literally. Can we move from thinking that growth is good, that balance is good? Because we know it in ourselves. Can we take what we deeply know in our own bodies, from the human body to the planetary body? If we could do that, we would be flipping the paradigm. So, well-being lies in that space. So when I first published this, I was really amazed by the response to the diagram. And it made me ask myself, how do other cultures depict health and well-being and thriving and flourishing? What does it look like? And I was just blown away when I started looking that again and again in cultures around the world, from the Taoist yin yang to the medicine wheel of Turtle Island to the Buddhist endless knot to the Celtic double spiral, it's this repeated shape, a sort of dynamic circle. So I realized that the donut was tapping unconsciously into something that indigenous cultures have known for millennia. And then I started to think, oh, it's like if we think we've been raised under this Western growth is good mindset, and there's other cultures that know balance is good, the donut acts in some way as a bridge back there. Can it help those of us raised with this growthist mindset back towards a balance that's been known in other cultures for millennia? And that's a journey I've been really enjoying. So if the goal is balance, the trouble is this. We are very far from that right now. All of the red in this image shows you the extent to which people worldwide are falling short on life's essentials. So the little red wedge on food, my finger as pointer, there we are. Food, this red wedge here goes 11% of the way to the center of the circle, because 11% of people worldwide don't have enough food to eat every day. We want to eliminate the red in the center of the circle from all of those dimensions. But here's the kicker. We've got to do it at the same time as coming back within all those planetary boundaries. So we can't just do it by growing. As last century's economists would have said that was good enough, because we now know that growing is pushing us over those planetary boundaries in resource use. We've got to eliminate human deprivation and ecological degradation at the same time. And this is a moment for pause. This is a totally different direction of economic progress than generations before us have seen. And I think our children and their children will quite rightly judge us and pull us on the sleeve and say, well, what did you do once that you knew? Once that you saw this? How did you change the way you eat and work and travel and invest and divest and protest and volunteer? How did you change your life to help bring us in? And we need to remember that last century's economic theories weren't written to solve this problem. They didn't see this. Why would we think their theories would turn this around? Last century's government policies weren't designed with this in mind. Why would they work? Last century's businesses weren't created and designed with this in mind. Why on earth would they be fit for turning the story around? We need new theories, policies, businesses, and ways of living and community aspirations that actually are drawn up in light of this challenge. And some people say that is utterly overwhelming, and other people say this is so exciting. I want to be on the team. I want to get going. And what I'm doing in my life, whatever role I play, what can I do differently towards this? So what can we do differently? And I'm going to speak for a bit about some of the theory that I want to see changed in economics, because I'm passionate about that, and that's what I wrote the book for. So if we wanted to turn this story around and come back within the donut, what would be the first diagram that you would teach to students beyond the donut itself? I would never show them supply and demand. I call it a diagram called the big picture. This is the whole of the economy, the embedded economy. What it just shows us, and I know you probably can't see the words at the back, it's fine, I'll explain it. The economy is a subset of society. It is a social construct. Our economy is a complete social invention. The beauty of that is we can reinvent it. And human society is embedded in the whole of the living world. We are part of nature and utterly dependent upon the rest of nature. So you've got an economy in society, in the living world, bathed in a river of solar energy from which all life is made possible. Thank you, sun. And then within the economy, we've got these different ways that we provision to meet our needs and wants. Yes, there's the market, but there's also the state. And 20th century economics ended up as a boxing match, like an ideological boxing match between these. You a laissez-faire free market capitalist or a state-loving socialist, choose. And this ideological boxing match means that economists lost sight of two other fundamental forms of provisioning that we all rely on every day. The household, where you all began this morning and you're all going back to tonight. Looking after each other, our partners, our parents, our kids, the cooking and the washing and the cleaning and the sweeping that make life work. It's not surprising because the founding fathers of economics didn't do that work. So they didn't really notice it. Adam Smith, when he wrote his great work, The Wealth of Nations, he was 43, he wasn't married, he was living at home with his mum. So guess who did the cooking, washing, cleaning and sweeping, right? He didn't think about it. Thank goodness for feminist economists. They came along in the 70s and they said, excuse me, we're going to put the household and unpaid caring work as part of the economy. It's essential. But also the commons, made famous by Elinor Ostrom, who got a Nobel Prize in economics for recognizing that people come together, often without the market or the state, but as a community, and provision for each other's needs and wants through collaboration. And again, you know, I feel, actually in this place, I feel it's the household, the market, the state, and the commons. I bet they're all at work here in different ways, because these work best when they work together. I wouldn't want to live in an economy that missed any one of these forms of provisioning. They're all essential. But I think we've been through decades where the market is just so dominated, pushed back, squeezed, overpowered, dominated, and it needs to be rebalanced. And we need to remember and name and recognize the roles we play in all of these ways. for meeting our needs and wants. So that for me is the big picture of the embedded economy. But I want to focus on two major dynamics that we need to put at the heart of our economics. And it's not the grow, grow, grow that we hear all the time from our politicians. The first is to recognize that we've inherited linear, degenerative economic systems. Right? We take from the Earth's resources, we make them into stuff we want, use it for a while and throw it away. And I grab a bit of hose pipe for that, right? So I show my hose pipe. It's this kind of linear input-output system. Stick it in the top, make it into stuff, waste out the bottom. That is what is pushing us over planetary boundaries. Taking again and again and again from Earth's sources, putting waste again and again in Earth's sinks until they're full, they're spewing, overflowing, and we are destroying the planetary boundaries. We know we have to turn this linear, degenerative industrial systems that made a lot of 20th century industrialists a lot of money. We have to turn them into regenerative, circular, cyclical systems where resources aren't used up, they're used again and again. Far more carefully, more collectively, more creatively, more slowly. And I can say that right here, right? Brinscombe Mill is using these resources again and again, far more carefully, more collectively, more creatively, and more slowly. And this is the beginnings of a circular, regenerative economy. So that is a fundamental shift that we need to make. And it's a beautiful opportunity to look at materials and resources and say, what can you be next? How can we reinvent you? And treasure the value that's stored inside your materials. A couple of examples. I mean, this place is full of examples of it, but just from around the world. In terms of urban design, so just for one field, making houses out of locally available material, like you can see here in India. So all the materials that are made from local clay and soil and timbers, and those houses will eventually, one day, literally crumble back into the mud. They are part of the earth. Here in Baltimore, people doing retrofit. Many architects say, you know, the best building is the one that already exists. Retrofit, save it. What can this be now? We actually love being in buildings that were something else. Oh, wow, look, there used to be a mill, or it used to be a bike shop, or it used to be a factory, it's creative, right? These spaces are beautiful. So there's a real opportunity to enjoy that retrofit. Did you know that in the UK, if you knock down a building and start and build a new build, no VAT. If you retrofit the building, 20% VAT. It's insane. So the financial signal is the absolute opposite of what it needs to be right now. So it's cutting against what we need to do. Circular construction in Amsterdam, the city adopted a really ambitious circularity policy, and there's one district in the city where every building that's built there needs to be made of circular materials that have a passport saying where they've come from, where they can go to. It can't be cemented and glued together. It has to be clipped and bolted so that it can be disassembled again. So they're using that as a pilot space for really learning as architects and designers how to make buildings with these kinds of materials. And then here in Jinhua in China, a sponge city, recognizing that every settlement is nestled in nature. And the floods may come. So are you going to get flooded by them, or are you going to make a sponge around the city so that it can be absorbed? So working with the natural landscape of a place so that you actually belong in nature rather than trying to tunnel, cover over rivers and block out the flooding, being part of it. So from degenerative to regenerative. But there's another major dynamic that we've inherited in our economies. We've inherited economies that are divisive by design, that tend to be designed through the coding of capital, through regulation, through privilege, through inheritance, through infrastructures that have been made. They capture value and opportunity in the hands of a few. And we're seeing the rise of this global 1%. Locally, nationally, definitely globally. There's absolutely no way that humanity can get into the donut with the scale of inequality there is in the world. 1%, the richest 1% of the world, own half the world's wealth. I can't actually get my head around what that actually means. It's the most extreme statistic I can think of. We need to go from divisive economies that capture value and opportunity in the hands of a few to far more distributive ones. Ooh, yeah, you like that, don't you? Enjoy that feeling, enjoy that noise you make, because we love this. Look at this. Yeah, doesn't that feel good? That's much more resilient. That's sharing around, that's things moving around, opportunities, resources, contacts, chances. We need distributive economies that share value with all who co-create it, and that pretty much turns out to be the whole of society. So how can we do that? pop it just there. See, it's resilient. So just again, thinking from urban situations, did you know in the city of Vienna, one of Europe's most elegant cities, more than 60% of people live in what we'd call social housing? It's normal, it's affordable, it's central, it's owned by the city and city-run co-ops. Because over 100 years ago, the city decided that housing is not an investment asset, it's actually a human right. And they decided to own the city's housing stock to make that possible. So the deep ownership transforms the actual use and the results in people's lives. In Chile, the architect Alejandro Aravena realized that many people would never be able to afford to buy a home, but a lot of them could buy half a house. So he's literally started designing half houses. Can you see? That's like half a house and then the other half is just empty. People would buy half a house with the money they had, and then over the years they saved up money and then they would fill the other half in. I mean, literally by just designing a house differently, he opened up home ownership to people who otherwise would have been locked in rental markets forever. That could be beautifully connect with the self-build movement. In Curitiba, I really love this example. They were the first city to have these kind of dedicated bus highways. Think of the poorest people doing the longest, laborious jobs in the city often live way out and spend hours a day commuting. And this put them first. It's cheap, it's affordable, it's fast, it's what's not to like. The bus has a dedicated, the traffic can go sit somewhere else, the bus is on its own route. And then in Cleveland in the US, a real commitment to say who's traditionally been marginalized from our society and how can we put them at the heart of the new skills revolution. So reaching out to the local black neighborhood communities who had traditionally been absolutely locked out of opportunity, let's bring you in and you will be the ones skilled up to be the installers of solar panels. So these are just some examples of many, many examples of distributive design. Again, you could just walk around Brinscombe Mill and other projects like it and say, what am I seeing that's been designed here to be distributive so that everybody is welcome, so that people get opportunity, so that the money that's made is shared fairly. I can already feel it and see it and hear it. I'm just a visitor. So you know these values are alive in this place as well and in your own town. So, regenerative and distributed by design. Let me pull back. I started with the 20th century economics that makes me mad. And this is still being taught. And we need a revolution. We need to start economics with a big picture, the economy embedded in society and the living world. We need to recognize that we are part of nature and we are the most social, the most pro-social reciprocal of all mammals. We've got to tap into that superpower. And that the goal is not endless growth. Surely it's to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. So that for me is the beginning of a 21st century economics. And I set out 7 ways to think, but you know, there's 9, 10, there's many, many more. And it's a real joy working with people, exploring what does it look like to expand this. But that's just theory. I'm just showing you theory. Ideas on a page. What's really exciting is when my book came out, people very quickly started coming up to me and saying either, I'm already doing this. One young woman came up to me and said, would you sign my book? My dad gave it to me. He said, he read it, he gave it to me, he said, I think I finally understand what it is you're doing with your life. So like donut as family therapy. It was great, right? So dad now understands what his daughter's doing. He thought she was doing some weird fringe thing with reclaimed wood, what? Oh, now looking at it through this lens, I see that you're actually part of a future economy. But people came up and said, I've got this on the table in my boardroom. I'm teaching this in the classroom. I'm a town councillor. Can we do this where we are? I'm a city mayor. Can we do this where we are? So I'm just going to tell the story of places, people and places in communities and in local government that have actually taken this and put it into practice. And they're the pioneers. I don't know how to do it because I'm not a town councillor or a mayor. I'm watching and learning from them. But we created a framework, and we call it Donut Unrolled. So people have asked, what would it mean for our city to live in the donut? And where I say city, think town, think district, think state. It could actually think nation. It could be at many, many levels. What would it mean for us to live in the donut? Well, we unroll it like this to make space. And there's a tiny little question there between the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. But it's actually a very, very big question. This, how can our place become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? I'm going to say that for Stroud. How could Stroud become a home to thriving people, the thriving people of Stroud, in an ecologically thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people worldwide and the health of the whole planet. What would it look like to try to do that? So we break it down into what we call the 4 lenses, and I'll just talk about each one. Just think of it from whether you live here or nearby, think of it where you live, your village, your town. How can everybody here thrive, right? Who is in the community of my place? What would it mean for everybody here to have good food, water, healthcare, education, housing, energy, transport, equity, decent income? Who's falling below that right now? And what would it mean to lift them up? That's the question that most places tend to ask themselves and focus on. Kind of quite rightly, right? It's about the people of this place. But we've got to go beyond that. We can also ask, how can this place be as generous as the wildland next door? Let's go to the woods. God, you've got some beautiful woods here. Let's go to the woods, the valleys. Let's go and see how generous nature is here. Because you could go up in the hills. Nature is sequestering carbon. She's cleaning the air. She's cleaning the water. She's cooling the air on a hot day from the treetops to the forest floor. It can be between 5 and 9 degrees. She's storing groundwater after a storm, keeping it stored in a water table, housing biodiversity, making us feel at home with incredible well-being. Nature is so generous. She keeps creating conditions conducive to life. And then we often come into our towns, there's flash flooding. There's an urban heat island effect. There's no wildlife. We're releasing carbon emissions in the way we build rather than sequestering them. Could we aim to make our cities and towns and settlements as generous as nature and start imitating nature's generosity in the way we build and retrofit and rebuild and design the places we live? That's the focus of that lens. But both of these are local. And you could feel it. It's what you feel when you're in a place. God, it's great. It's wonderful here. Great coffee, great community. I love the wildlife. What's not to like? But we've got to ask the other side of the question. What are our global responsibilities? So we've got to ask, how can our place respect the health of the whole planet? And let's just think about what's in this room. The clothes I'm wearing, they weren't made in the UK. This projector, the laptop, it's not made in the UK. The food, actually, because here tonight, probably the food is all over. Often the food's been imported. So many things that we're using to have a good life here, the phones in your pockets, people, they weren't made in the UK. Who assembled our phones? Were they paid a living wage? Who stitched our clothes? Were they paid a living wage? So we're connected, of course, to the world through these global supply chains. How can we make sure not only that the materials that we use, but also the people in those global supply chains are respected? So we think about the way we live here and its impact on climate change, on emissions and resource use, and on the people in those global supply chains. And that's the 4 lenses of the donut unrolled. And when councils say, yeah, we want to live in the donut, we say, here you go, folks, this is the framework. It's not easy, right? That's really complex. You might be thinking, that's way too much. It's a lot. But you know what? If we ignore any of these one issues, it doesn't go away. It just boomerangs right back at us. So it's better to have it all on the table. And what we found is when towns and cities sit down and actually use this framework, people are relieved. Everything is there on the table. My issues here. I'm on climate change. You're on gender justice. You're on local water pollution. And you're on education. Wow, it's all here. And we can talk about all of it. So places started adopting this. In the first city with Amsterdam in 2019, at the height of the COVID crisis, Amsterdam said, we're going to do a donut city portrait. And they launched it right then in the month where they had the highest infection rate. And they made a little orange donut, very Amsterdam, Dutch orange donut. And they made it their own, which was great, right? They took a concept, they made it their own. That's what makes it spread. It's ours now. This is our version of it. And within 6 weeks, Copenhagen, bit rivalrous with Amsterdam to be a cool European city. Copenhagen then votes 6 weeks later, well, we're going to explore what it means for our city to live in the donut. And that for me was the first clue about peer-to-peer inspiration. There's nothing like a mayor saying, yes, well, obviously we're doing this is the right and obvious thing to do, to make another mayor think, wow, we better get on that, right? So people listen, obviously, to people who are a bit like themselves, but doing that thing that they thought was impossible, they're already doing it. And then it was Brussels, and then it was Barcelona, and I thought, hang on, is this going to go like alphabetically, A, B, C? But then, over the years, over 100 towns and cities and local governments, states, districts around the world in so many different countries have picked up these concepts and started putting into practice. So I'm going to give you a few examples. Here's just some examples from many places. Last year we had a wonderful gathering of cities in Bad Nauheim in Germany. People came from all over the world. They said, we're putting this into practice. And it was really amazing seeing these city policymakers learning from each other. They were the ones to learn from each other. How did you do that? How did you get started? How did you convince your colleagues? Where did it begin? What was the first thing you did? What about these metrics? How are you getting... It's amazing to see that. So, some examples. Barcelona is one of the cities that's doing it. So you can see here they took the donut, they unrolled it, they gathered all the metrics. They decide, what are the metrics? We don't say you must measure it with this or that. What are the local metrics that make sense to us here? They measured it, they re-rolled it, there's their donut. That's not an easy thing to publish. That's not a good news diagram, right? Everything you can see sticking out the donut is either human shortfall or ecological overshoot. So I take my hat off to any local government that says we're going to publish this. We're going to publish how we're falling short because it allows us, it gives us a vision of where we want to get to. And they're using it in tandem. I don't know if you know about Barcelona. They're doing amazing things. That picture there, this picture here, this would have been a total gridlock traffic jam 5 or 10 years ago. They took out the cars, they put in trees. That builds community, that builds connection, that builds ecosystems. And they're creating these incredible play spaces right at the heart of the city. So Barcelona is one of the cities that are using it. Ipoh in Malaysia, and I'm jumping here, this is really interesting, right? In Malaysia, a middle-income country, totally different from the European context. We want to be the first city in Asia that adopts the donut, and they're doing it their way, and they've changed it and made their own donut, but they're asking these same questions. What does it mean for us in a middle-income country context to have this ambition? And I'm already seeing that what they're beginning there is spreading to other towns and cities in Malaysia because it's that your peer, somebody like yourself, spreading these ideas. Cornwall took the concept quite early on, and they said every policy here, every infrastructural policy that we want to do in Cornwall goes through this decision wheel, this donut-shaped decision wheel. It's whether it's to build a cycle lane, does it improve human well-being, and how could it do that better? Does it improve and help combat within the ecological ceiling? And so the project has to be approved through that. And then they created this lovely dashboard, like a kind of traffic light of how well they're doing. And you can see what's getting better in green, what's still getting worse, and what hasn't changed. That tells you a hell of a lot more than if I said, for example, Cornwall's GDP grew by 1.3% over the last year. Why? Was there an oil spill they had to clean up? Did they employ more teachers in the schools? That's not telling you anything, but this really tells you a rich picture in nature's own metrics and in humanity's own metrics of the story of the place. Thimphu in Bhutan, so the government of Bhutan have this wonderful concept called gross national happiness. They said that out of everything we see coming out of Western economics, the donut really resonates most closely with our concept. So we want to do gross national happiness in the donut. This is one of the times you think, is this really happening? The government of Bhutan wants to do gross national happiness in the donut. Okay, and they made these cartoons of the year 2047. This is the vision of a good life in Bhutan. It's their vision that they're now moving towards using these tools. If you're interested in any of this, my brilliant colleague Leonora, who works with all the local governments, she's documented what all these towns and cities are doing in this guide that just says this is how they're getting started. There's 9 different ways. And so any town councillors or local governments around the world, we say, this is your playbook. This is showing you how people like you have got started in so many different ways. And like everything that we do, it's free, it's online, it's in the commons. We put all of our tools and resources in the commons because that's how the ideas can spread fastest. So, briefly, there have been over 60 community groups that have sprung up around the world as well, some of them from Frankfurt, Brazil, Switzerland, Seattle, Czechia, Devon, Sydney. People have just said, we want to make a community-led group to bring about change here. You don't have to do that at all. You can use the donut concept in an existing group, but they chose to set one up. Some examples, this is from Birmingham, amazing organization called Civic Square in Birmingham, using it to reimagine the neighborhood. So it's at the neighborhood scale, and they're doing retrofit of one street to demonstrate what could happen to towns, to housing across the UK if we did this. Another place that I'm really interested in is Sydney. So they had massive wildfires. Sorry, not Sydney. They'd kill me for saying Sydney. Melbourne. They had massive wildfires. Then they had COVID. Then they had wildfires. Like just being hit again and again by crisis. And a lot of people in Melbourne said there has to be a different vision of what a good life is. And they turned in that crisis to the donut. And now it's at the heart of their organization called Regen Melbourne. They're aiming for a swimmable Yarra River at the heart of the city, for livable streets, for edible streets. So again, using it to take a health stock of the city as it is and vision forward. So, these are the final thing I want to share with you. I'm showing you examples of places getting started and on the way, and it's exciting. But of course we get stuck, right? And it's hard. These are like schools and regions, cities and districts and neighborhoods all aiming to get into the donut, but you run into regulations or budget cycles or global politics gets in the way, or crises or lack of funding or burnout or institutional inertia. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Right? And it gets in the way, and then suddenly along comes a journalist and says, hello, yes, where's a place that's actually already living in the donut now? There isn't, folks, there isn't. This is a journey. Show me the visible results you've achieved so far. How can you prove this new economy is going to work, right? The proof lies with you. And why is it taking so long? So, yeah, somebody felt that. Change takes time. Change takes time. So I'm going to end here with quotes from 5 people who I find really inspirational, and I invite you just to think about how this resonates, wherever you are in your life, in your initiative, in your town, in your work, of how this sits with you. So I'm going to begin with the bad boy of neoliberal economics, Milton Friedman. In the 1940s, when Keynesian economics, government spending was dominant, he wanted to make markets first the dominant mindset. He won in the end, by the way, spoiler. He won, like I'd say 1980 when Reagan and Thatcher came to power and really put neoliberal economics on the stage. Milton had his day, but he began in 1947, 33 years. How would he have felt if a journalist rang up after 5 years and said, how's it going, Milton? It's not going very well, but he won in the end. Here's what Milton says. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, people turn to the ideas that are lying around. So we say, and he got the ideas lying around. It was Hayek's book that Margaret Thatcher had in her handbag, and they had loads of money, so they set up loads of think tanks around the world to make these ideas sound normal. They set up professorships in lots of universities to embed it with tenure in a university to make it sound really proper, serious economics. We don't have that money, but what we do have is people already putting it into practice. So we say at Donut Economics Action Lab, why would you only want the ideas lying around? We don't want them lying around. We want them up and running. So we work with any town or county or city that comes to us and says, we want to put this to practice. Great, great. We never try and lobby or persuade anybody. We want to work the ones who already want to do it. Great, because you know from your context and where you are, you have a strong sense that this could fly. That's the place to go. So we'll work with you, and let's get this up and running. And we can point to people from Malaysia, to Devon, to Seattle, to Sydney. Where do you want to go? They're just getting on with it. And for me, this is really important in the face of the very big men, violent politics that we're seeing on the global stage. Just that places, local governments that are elected are just getting on with a different vision in places all around the world. And to me, that's really precious, just to keep holding that and keep doing that, and demonstrating that a different economy is not only possible, it's already happening in many, many places. Because that leaves the possibility of something to turn to when the crisis hits. Donella Meadows, she's one of my heroes of systems thinking, and she said, how do you change paradigms? You keep pointing at the anomalies and the failures of the old paradigm. You keep speaking and acting loudly and with assurance from the new one. You insert people with the new paradigm in places of public visibility and power. You don't waste time with reactionaries, rather you work with active change agents and with the vast middle ground of people who are open-minded. So just keep standing for what you stand for. Don't get drawn into arguing what you're against. And so I spend very little time arguing what I'm against. I did it in one slide. Did you see that? I showed you in one slide and then we moved on. Stand for what you stand for. And every time somebody presents, whether it's donut economics or well-being economy or economy for the common good, or a different framing. Every time we present, you may be changing somebody's mind, opening something up for somebody who've no idea what they may go on and do. So keep standing and stand and speak from where you are. And here, show people around, this is what we do. This is real, this is materializing. The power of the positive, and I think, one of the best forms of protest is to propose something new. We need all kinds of protests, but we need to be propositional and show what we're for. Howard Zinn, an amazing historian, he wrote a brilliant book called The People's History of the United States. And he said, the leaps that man has made in social evolution came from those who acted as if they knew they were going to win or as if they'd already won. So you can think of the suffragettes who said, we're not here to break laws, we're here to make laws. And they got carried off by policemen. And they knew, and at the time, you know, people said, oh, there was terrible harridan women. And yet, you go into any kid's classroom today, they're the ones on the walls of the classroom. They acted as if they absolutely knew that they were going to get the vote. See history in the distance and bring it to the now. Gandhi, you know, the way he behaved in the face of the British Empire, he acted as if he absolutely knew that the British would have to leave. And his dignity, that the way he held himself is partly, I think, what the British Empire just didn't know how to respond to him. The black people who sat down at counters in the US, knowing that they were breaking the laws because these places were racially segregated, but they did it anyway, in fear of actual bodily violence, as did Gandhi. But they did it anyway, because they knew the long arc of history was with them. So again, all of these people were hated in their day, and they're all in the history books, and they're taught on the classrooms of our kids' walls in school. So how do we act today as if we know we're going to succeed, as if we believe that the regenerative and distributive economy is the one that makes sense on this earth, even though it can get knocked down, even though funding cuts and it can be threatened, but we act as if we know that this is the way that we belong again as an economy, as a society on this planet. Shirley Chisholm, she was the first black woman to be elected to US Congress, so she knows a thing or two about breaking through boundaries. And she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And so you can ask yourself, well, what table are you not getting, right? Your issue is not getting access to, and how do you bring a folding chair? And so we all say, or you can make your own table, make a long table, host your own festival, create your own prize, write your own newspaper, make a better party. Find ways of making yourself visible and getting access and getting voice, but doing it your own way, with joy, and make people think, oh, I actually wish I was at that. I wish I was there at that table. Okay, last one from a Nobel laureate in chemistry, Ilya Prigozhin. He said, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. So you can think about all the small islands of coherence. I think we're in one right now. Places that are networked to connect, right? I bet Brindiscombe Mill is connected to other hubs in this county, but across the country. Let's meet up, let's connect up. For me, we always say in donut economics, don't try to be the movement, join the movement. The movement is bigger than us. We're a part of it. We're one of the islands. How do we connect up and show that actually this future is popping up everywhere already? So these brilliant quotes from people really inspire me and inspire us in the work that we do, and I hope they also inspire to you. So let me finish by saying, if the work of Donut Economics Action Lab sounds of interest, personally, you'd like your kids to learn in school, you could take it into your company, you could take it into your community group or your town council. It's all free on our website, it's donuteconomics.org. We put everything in the commons because we believe that is the way that ideas are going to spread at the speed and scale that times demand. You can join our community, or you can just browse the resources, download anything, try it out. We ask only for reciprocity. We ask when people use our tools, please just share back how it went and share back any innovations you do, because that's how we all learn together. So I'm going to stop there because I know we're going to get into conversation soon. Thank you very much for giving me the time to present this, and I'm really looking forward to bringing it right into the context of this very beautiful place. Thank you very much.
Everybody, thank you so much, Kate, for taking the energy to come here and speak. That was so inspiring. When I met Kate online, a month ago, Kate, we met online? Jess, who helps organise these sanctuary events, was a bit worried about how much of a fanboy I was. And she told me to calm down before the conversation, during the conversation, and afterwards. But Kate has blown my mind, because the things she has just said resonate not only with what we're all about in this place, but there's a couple of particular ones. She said that donut economics is family therapy. My sister who works at the back there, came up to me halfway through and just went, "Oh, Will, she's stolen one of our diagrams." And I said, She may have seen our website when it took visitors a year in a long time ago. But the energy it brought was to bring together the things that people feel together. And you mentioned the word new way of living at one point. That was one of the phrases you used, I wrote down. On the blackboard and there we have this written down: a message of hope to the vulnerable, to set free those who feel trapped, to heal the hurt and wounded, to release those oppressed by injustice, to offer a new life and a new way of living. And Kate today is a grown-up who was saying that this may actually work from economic backgrounds as well. And we wrote down the wall about, 5 years ago, and now we get Kate to come in and explain how it might come together. I mean, as she was saying that quote, she said at some point, how did we respond in the 21st century as the world was falling apart? How did we respond? And as we were just getting the notes that are outside, I pointed out our other quote we have written up. We're not called to simply bind up those damaged by the wheels of injustice. We are called to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. And the stuff that Kate just said has filled me with that renewed hope, like those suffragettes, that if we in Stroud and beyond, Cirencester, Bristol, all the places we work and all the places you guys work, stand up and be counted, people like Kate have cleared a way for us to say we're not just barking up trees, we're actually real people with real ideas. So thank you, Kate, for that inspiration. Okay, so we've literally been given about 500 questions, so we won't be able to do them all. You'll be pleased to know that two of our elected representatives, Kate, in the interval there. So I'm sure they've signed up county council and district council to be donut councils. Press release is not submitted yet, but I'm assuming it's coming. And so we'll probably stick here to the more human-centred economics parts as opposed to the political bits, because we aren't necessarily the political commentators of this world. So we'll start with a few economic questions and we'll go from there. Okay, so here's a good economics question for you to start with. Can Keynesian economics have validity in the very different world from the one we lived in the past?
This is very highbrow. I didn't sign up for this. Can Keynesian economics have validity in a very different world than one? Golly. Hello, Stroud. Keynesian economics means, if I put it very briefly, that governments can spend into the economy to get the economy going when it's in recession, and then governments should, so that they can do counter-cyclical spending. So when the economy is booming, the government should spend less, and they should spend in when and then our friend Milton Friedman came and said, it'll never work, the markets will always preempt what you're going to do, and you can't do it. I personally believe the government has a very important role in public spending and in provisioning. If I had to lean one direction or other, I'd be a Keynesian economist. But Milton Friedman and John Maynard Keynes were in a battle in the 20th century, but neither of them were talking about the fact that we live on a planet and we can't have endless growth. So they both had the same thing in common, which that the shape of progress was endless growth. And so I'm not going to go for Keynesian economics. We need to, if Keynes were alive still today, I think he famously said a good economist needs to be a little bit of a mathematician and a little bit of a historian and probably a bit of a poet. And he saw that economics needs to draw on all disciplines. And he would have said, and you need to be an earth system scientist. And you need to recognize that we live within planetary boundaries. And I think he would have been the first to remake his theories to recognize and respect what we now know about our utter dependence on staying within planetary boundaries.
Great answer. That was a tough one to start.
That was very highbrow. Got it.
I mean, there are quite a lot of tough questions here. I'm going to filter a few out. We'll see how we get on. Here's a good one. Do you know of any universities? We've got some young people in the room tonight, so maybe we've got grandchildren or children that are changing their curriculum to more match the sort of context you're coming from.
Yeah, so one thing that really bothers me is when young people doing their A-levels read donut economics, they get very excited, and then they say, I'm going to go to university and study economics, and then they get there, it's like, oh, this is the thing she was against. And that breaks my heart when I've heard that happen many times. But it also excites me that students, so after the global financial crash, all the economics students were really embarrassed because they would go down the pub with their friends and their friends would say, you're studying economics, you tell me what's going on. And they didn't have any answers because they were being taught an economic theory that banks and money were kind of neutral. They were taught, you know, you don't really need to understand how that system works, and yet this was the system that was causing absolute chaos. So the embarrassment of the students led them to set up something called Rethinking Economics. And it's an amazing international network of students around the world who study economics, who are protesting against the limited mindset that they're being taught, and they're calling for reform of their economics degrees. And so I've been working with them for many years, and have collaborated with them quite recently, actually, so I taught a guerrilla course. I live in the city of Oxford, and some students said to me, why isn't this just the economics we're taught anyway? And I decided to teach a guerrilla course at night in the university, 8-week course. It was for anybody who'd come to the city of Oxford, so at Oxford University, Oxford Brookes University, to study economics of any kind, whether you were undergraduate or a PhD, you were welcome in this course. And the great thing was, I thought I was going to be teaching in the back room of a pub. And then more and more students heard about it, and then we ended up in the geography department, and then more students heard about it, and we ended up in the business school, the biggest lecture theatre the university had with 300 students, in the Said Business School. So it was like, let's take this to the belly of the beast. On Monday nights, we took over that place, and I taught donor economics, and I taught one of the 7 ways to think each week. And then after that, I wrote up the slides and added to them, and then I wrote up reading lists, and I compiled videos, and it's now on the platform. So if anyone's interested, if you go to our website, it's just called donoreconomics.org/university courses, there's all the materials that any lecturer could want. It's basically saying, look, if you want to integrate donor economics into your course, I'm just giving you my slides. It's not a lecture, it's like lots of little chunks of, you could do 10 slides on this point, 5 slides on that point. Here's lots of readings and videos and activities. Go for it. It's like, these are ingredients, make your own recipe. So we're now running regular workshops with lecturers and academics who are coming back and saying, I am teaching this, or I've been teaching this for 5 years, or this is my course textbook. So people are introducing it and adopting it. But I have to say, the economics profession, more than any other discipline, is incredibly resistant to this change. You know, I wrote the book intending to transform economics. It's been picked up almost in every other academic discipline beyond economics. Politics, geography like open arms, urban design, medical schools. I get invited to go and give lectures in medical schools, in architecture courses, in engineering. So other subjects, by the way, ones which are actually embedded in the material reality of the world. Business, I'm often asked to give talks in business courses, but the economics department is very often very resistant to it, because by putting the economy inside the living world, you are bounding it. That changes everything on day one, and that's pretty much shakes the paradigm. And if you're expert in that paradigm and someone's pulling the rug right from under you, it's probably personally very challenging to take that on board. But there are universities around the world. If you really wanted to be sure that you're getting a degree that was aligned with this, you would look for something called ecological economics. That is economics that starts by recognizing it's a part of a living planet. So ecological economics is the foundation. That's the closest that already exists, and there's offered master's degrees in universities around the world.
Interesting. It's interesting. Thomas Kuhn, the philosopher of science, talks about webs of knowledge. Once you have a set of beliefs, to change one of them means the whole web has to die. Yes. So if you built your whole life telling everyone that growth is good, you're not predisposed to go, do you know what, maybe it's not so good. Yes. And so I can imagine, as you say, economists are scared more than most.
And can I just say on the back of that, so people often say, economics will change one funeral at a time. But I don't know if that's true, because actually sometimes the older professors, they're from a time that actually, like pre-80s, 70s, they're from a time that had a lot more diverse economic thought. They used to teach the history of economic thought. That's almost never taught anymore. You just learn this is economics. You don't learn the history, so you don't get it contextualized. And it's not often the oldest professors. I remember I was in Belgium giving a talk to a bunch of university professors, and it was in the coffee break. One young guy came up to me, and he was in his mid-30s, and he said, I love these ideas you're presenting. I would find them really exciting to teach to my students, but I'm on track for getting tenure, so I have to be careful. And that was what lasted me, right? And so this is a really good example that we are all bound by the institutional structures that we sit in. whether it's what our boss is telling us is the target for this week's sales, or the institution is telling us this is what the right journals to publish in, or these are the theories. And so you get endlessly, you know, we all feel it. There's a kind of knot in the stomach, the gap between my values and my vision and what I believe and wish for my kids versus what the institution I work in is actually requiring me to do. And I think so much of it comes down to remaking institutional design.
Yes, and there's a little aside. Someone's asked, is geography a more hostile and all-encompassing subject? But it sounds like geography is a good
Hostile?
one. Yeah, that was the question.
Is geography a more hostile subject?
Yeah, I think that's what it says. I can't really read, but I think it says. Actually, maybe it says more holistic, actually.
Ah! Yes, I tend to find geography is very hostile. Geography is like open arms. Geographers are like, this is our world anyway. Welcome, come in. Geography is a much more holistic subject. Although I have to say, I have teenagers who are 16-year-old teenagers who are doing their GCSEs right now, and my son, who loved geography, he said, I'm not going to do geography A-level because it's so neoliberal. Because on the curriculum, they have to call high-income countries advanced countries, and my kids are like, I don't want to say these countries are advanced, they're all overshooting planetary boundaries, we're not advanced. and also they have to answer these questions like, what are the benefits to the UK of climate change? What? Yeah, they've inherited, this is, thank you Michael Gove, this is what my children are learning, kind of a 14 years of conservative government geography syllabus. Is like they have to be able to list off all the benefits of climate change and write long questions about whether or not it's anthropocentric or anthropogenic. So yeah, anyway, but geography in general tends not to be hostile, it's quite holistic. Yes.
That obviously skillfully gave you that question,
yes.
So you could answer fully. It must be hard calling for reform a lot these days as well, seeing as a political party. That must be an awkward way of calling for more reform.
Yes, I don't tend to call for reform.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah. So thinking about sort of a local question, we've got councillors here, we've got some of the NHS, we've got all sorts of professionals in the room. What do you think the role of moral leadership is when it comes to changing the world? You've talked about the donut being, not too little, not too much. How does moral leadership play into this at all, if at all?
Wow. Moral leadership, ooh, like that. Well, then I would say, what is the good, right? So we need to put the sense of...
A bit of Plato there.
Bit of Plato, if you want to, yeah, you can have a bit of Plato. What is the good? What is eudaimonia? What is our deep happiness? And in a way, the donut is aiming to say, what is a fundamental good for which we should be aiming? But I think moral leadership, gosh, in these times, moral leadership is definitely courage, right? It's courage to stand for something. And actually, in all of the places, in all the local governments, and I think local government requires a particular kind of courage because you have to get elected, right? So you can community groups, fantastic, small businesses, fantastic, but there's something about being in government that you stand for something and then you have to hope that in standing that you will get re-elected. So I recognize the courage it takes to take a stand and adopt something, but in all of the places where donut economics is now being publicly put into practice, so there's more than 50 city, local governments, municipal governments around the world that have embedded it in their vision or in their strategy or in their processes, but publicly talking about it. There's more than 100 working with it, but 50 of them are kind of naming it publicly. There's just there's a conviction. There's somebody or one or two people who just had this conviction that things could be different, and they wanted to put values at the heart of it, and they decided that donut economics in this case was a useful tool. And I really admire the moral leadership of having that conviction and standing for it and being able to articulate it and bring others along with it and make it a compelling vision, even when you will get the question, how are you going to prove that this economy works? Why isn't it the other way around? It's really obvious that the one that we have is not working. Why is the onus all on me to prove the case of the one that we only get to find out by trying? So to me, it's a conviction and a courage to take a stand and stand for something, because it's so, the politics we've got today is so easy to mock people, to be against things, to lampoon things, to be cynical about things, to say what everybody else is getting wrong, to have the courage to stand for something. And again, I'm not publicly elected, so I admire people who are and who take concepts like these and put it into practice working alongside political parties who don't agree with them, but still building the coalition to get it through. Working with an electorate whom won't agree with them, but they make it happen. And I really admire the conviction to dedicate your life to public service and to do that. And I think that is a form of moral leadership.
Yeah. Change of tone. Was there a reason you didn't put all living beings in your donut? Is it human-centric specifically or not? That's one of the questions here.
Stroud, you're very impressive. That is a really good question. So if I hold this up, here's a little donut I made earlier. So if I know you can't read the words on the 9 planetary boundaries, but the 9 planetary boundaries say things like climate change, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, fertilizer pollution, fresh water withdrawals, land conversion, biodiversity loss, air pollution, and ozone layer depletion. Now, one of those is different from all of the others. It's called biodiversity loss here, in that it contains all other living beings, whereas the rest of them are geochemical processes. So right here where my thumb is, all other living beings are here. This is the framework of the 9 planetary boundaries. And so I took that framework and added to it, and I put human rights in the center. But it's a really great question, whoever just brought that. And it's one that I've been playing with and talking about. Like, if I wanted to evolve this donut and take it further towards an indigenous worldview, what you'd do is you'd take all other living beings, and you wouldn't have them sitting here on the outside. You'd bring them into the center of the donut with humans and say, how do we meet the needs of all living beings within the means of this extraordinary planet? And actually, it's a question I've been begging master's students and PhD students. I'm saying, somebody going to take this up, because then you've got a really interesting philosophical question. Well, what is the basis on which we make space for each other? What are the rights of all other living beings that we're going to respect? What happens if they're in tension with human rights? Will we say half the earth to nature? Will we have animal rights? Will we do it through recognizing the rights of nature, the rights of rivers like the Wanganui River in Aotearoa, New Zealand? How will we do this? And I think it is one of the next frontiers of human and the rest of the living world relations, of how we navigate that space. I haven't done that I didn't think to do that when I drew the donut. I just took the 9 planetary boundaries and I added humanity in. But now I can see it. Some people say, well, why don't you do that? And here's the reason why I'm going to stick with the donut as it is, at least keep it. Because I think of it as, it's a really, really big bridge to jump from you're raised being told that GDP growth is progress, to jump all the way across a valley that says all living beings are of equal value and all have rights, and we need to... That's a heck of a mindset shift. And actually, many people need to be able to sort of stand on a bridge in the middle of the river and get halfway and then halfway there. And I now think, I showed you early on there was a kind of growth in the donut and then the indigenous worldviews. I see it as something that people can leap to and then go on beyond. So whoever's saying, why not bring all living beings into the center? I'm like, go for it, my friend. Come up with that theory, draw that diagram, figure out how we can do that. I'm going to stay holding the place in the middle, because there's plenty more people who need to come onto the bridge who can't jump all the way across to that worldview. But I'm noticing in the students I've been teaching for 12 years, when I first started teaching, the donut was, ooh, that's very radical. That's very radical. But now the students turn up and they're like, yeah, and? Yeah. They're going straight past it. And so it's amazing. You're seeing that shift in mindset of the more than human world becoming part of our world. And that's a really good thing. So I say, go across that bridge. Somebody do that work. But I still think it's valuable to have something that allows us to land where we can recognize human rights and the rest of the living world.
And is it worth thinking, those images you showed the various ways the economy can be shown in old symbols. You showed old symbols. They were all religious symbols, pretty much. Is there a link between...
What do you mean, that we're religious symbols?
I'm trying to think what slide it was now. You were describing the way you've drawn the donut, the
Yes.
circle,
those...
You had the Jewish symbols, all sorts of symbols. Buddhist ones. Do you think that link between holistic nature, how can they all religious or mostly religious? Is there something holistic there that helps?
So are they religious? They're associated with worldviews or cosmovisions. Some of them are religions like Buddhism, but I think with the Turtle Island medicine wheel, I don't know if they call that a religion, but it's It's a symbol of a worldview and a
Holistic,
cultural,
it's-
it's a
yeah, yeah.
holistic worldview.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I just found it really fascinating that the symbols from so many cultures are circular, right? There's some, again, images are really powerful, and we know that the circle is a really robust, literally holistic shape, and there's something deeply satisfying and balanced about that. And then when you see those and you say, but why in the West have we adopted this metaphor of grow, 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 grow? And it's insane.
Yeah.
It goes through the ceiling. It does nothing in life succeeds by trying to grow forever. It'll destroy itself or the system. We call it cancer in our own bodies.
Yeah.
We know if some, you know, we celebrate growth in the economy, but we know the opposite end of that metaphor. If your friend goes to the doctor and the doctor says, you know, you have a growth, we go very quiet. We don't celebrate that because growth inside a living system we know is a threat to that system. So we already know the other end of that metaphor.
And how do you think I was looking at the real living wage today. I was in a meeting, I was bored, so I was deciding to look at what the real living wage was over the last 10 years, set by the Real Living Wage Foundation. So it was £8, I think, 10 years ago, and now it's up to £12.60.
Yeah.
And it's played havoc with our wage bills because we try and stick with it and then
Yeah.
shovels up. How does donut economics work in a world where Westerners feel poor? Because we're not, right? We live in the most beautiful country, great health services, all those things. But does your message find it harder to land when people are going, oh, I can't even afford to go on holiday to, you know, Benidorm for the week? How is that something you've noticed at all, or is that not really playing into it?
Ooh. So I think there, I mean, of course, there's huge inequality in this country, and this country is one of the most unequal in Europe and most unequal amongst high-income countries. This is going to be related to your point. I think we get into cost of living crises, conversations around the price of milk or bread, and actually, I think, and I heard somebody talking about this the other day in a way that I find really compelling, which it seems to play out around the cost of food, but actually, underlying, thank you very much, it's housing. It's the extraordinary cost of housing that squeezes so much of people's fundamental budgets that you then find yourself unable to pay for the marginal price changes at the daily essentials. It's the housing, and that's why I think that example from Vienna is so powerful, that how housing and land are owned, and look, that's now part of your own story here, right? The underlying ownership, who owns, and in the chapter I wrote on distributive design, it's like, who owns the sources of wealth creation? That's where we've got to get to. It's not, I don't think it's endless about redistributing income. It's about who owns the sources of wealth, who owns the land. This country, we know, has incredibly concentrated land ownership in the hands of very, very wealthy families, often through royal gift, and most land, once upon a time, back then you owned it because it was taken by violence, right? Taken by force. That's where the property came from in the first place. But who owns the housing? I mean, we know that international markets buying housing in the UK are pushing rents up, people using housing as an investment asset. It's a great way to make a return. And there's something about housing that it's this parallel market of very wealthy people wanting a higher percentage of return for their money they don't know what to do with, and every family needing a home. And you've got the two utterly different people with utterly different power relations competing for the very same building. And it's so problematic that housing is treated as an investment. So I think we could see massive reform in it. You know, if you want to open up housing, do we need to build another 1.5 million homes? Or actually do we need to look at the housing stock we have and say, how can this housing be used and owned in a far more equitable way so that it's turned back into homes for families rather than an investment asset for very wealthy people?
That's a great answer. We're lucky to have, I think, the county's largest landowner in the room in the Diocese of Gloucester, so that'll be good to listen to that. But what's amazing is they've got their own housing association they've set up. One of the things the Diocese said to me once was they think over 10 years. And one of the bits you mentioned in your talk was how politicians are 5 years cycles.
Right.
And actually 10 years is short for the Diocese, it's actually 100 years.
Yes.
So there's a whole thing about that Vienna story you told us, which is 100 years ago,
Yes.
some very clever people, or whatever, sensible people, made a decision, and 100 years later. And there's a question here linked to that. What could the government do to help match those who want to help and those who need help? So I'm thinking from an economic perspective, is there any tax that you've ever dreamt of if the government could invent you would be keen to do?
I would love to see them change the VAT that I talked about. I just find it insane that anybody wanting to retrofit a building is paying 20% over. And I was talking to some architects the other day and saying, does this have a real impact? Oh, God, yeah, they say. It absolutely undermines, if you want people to retrofit a building, it's just so much more expensive than just knocking down and studying it. So that drives me mad because it's literally cutting in the wrong direction. But I think, we can all see there's a rise in conversations about wealth taxes in this country. I think one of the ways in which we're addicted to endless growth, and one of the reasons the Chancellor is saying, grow, 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 is because the Chancellors always want to raise tax revenue without raising the tax rate. No government wants to raise the rate of tax, but if you can grow the economy, you'll get a percentage more just through the growth. I think we're going to have to, we can't keep growing our economies to the ceiling and using up Earth's resources. We're going to have to change that conversation and redistribute within our country.
Interesting. And linked to that, this is a good question here. How do you help with particularly politicians, but all of us in the room? Some of us work for big organisations, endowed organisations, or perhaps government organisations, or just businesses. How do you help them move away from the scarcity mindset? One of the fascinating things about my life is I always joke, I think a man might come out of the sky one day and rescue us, so it gives me a real growth mindset. But so many politicians can't say, oh, God will save us in 3 years. You have to go, we're going to fix it ourselves. How do you think we move that scarcity mindset out of the public discourse? Because don't know, fundamentally saying there's enough, right? The world's big enough, there's enough animals. So have you done much thinking about that?
So I'm not waiting for a man to come out of the sky. But
do a bit of work too, but that's my get out of jail free card.
I would say, and I was talking about it a little bit earlier when I was showing you the donut unrolled, this is not a planet of scarcity. This is the only known living planet in the universe, and it's alive because nature is generous. Nature generates conditions conducive to life. And nature is playing the infinite game. The infinite game, which is you win it by keeping it going, as opposed to finite games like Monopoly that you win by triumphing over everybody else. So the infinite game is to keep the game going, and that's what nature, and we can have big philosophical questions about where nature comes from. Is it an evolutionary anomaly, or is it by design? Nature is phenomenal, and nature does not create scarcity. Nature creates abundance. Nature keeps giving clean air and clean water and cool conditions and housing wildlife and biodiversity, and it keeps things going. So nature is not operating on a scarcity. We create scarcity, and a lot of scarcity is created artificially so that you don't have it. So you're going to have to work and pay me to get it. So a lot of scarcity is artificially created.
Have you ever played the Game of Life? Do you know that game?
Yeah, grew up on that game.
Oh, maybe it's the wrong game then, if you're that excited. What's the one where you have to go through life? You go to school, you get a job, and then you die, and the winner is one with the most money.
Yeah, I was quite excited by that, but we didn't play it to have the most money.
No, because that game, my kids play it, I'm like, this is the most depressing game ever, right?
No, we played it to have fun, and you get your kids in the car. Yeah, you just don't care about the money at the end.
The morality of the game is whoever's richest when you die loses, right? Or wins, and in real life you lose, you can't take it with you. So everything you're saying is a caveat to that model of Western way.
So the game that we all know is Monopoly, right? Everybody grew up in a house, so it's just normal to play the game. Can I just quickly tell you about the game Monopoly, because it's phenomenal. It was invented by a woman called Lizzie McGee, whose dad was a politician in the US. He wrote a book called Poverty and Progress. He traveled around the US and he gave her a book about poverty and progress that saw why is America getting rich, but there's poverty and progress side by side, and it's because of land ownership. And so she wanted to invent a game that would make this visible. So she invented a game, it's called the Landlord's Game. And there was a board, and there were properties around the board, and you could go around and you could buy them, sounding familiar. It had 2 sets of rules. In the first set of rules, everybody started with a different amount of money, and the game was won when the person with the least amount of money had doubled their income. And if you bought a property, you put some money in something that was called the community chest. Suddenly it makes sense. You paid a tax. And she showed through these rules that if you played the prosperity rules, that when everybody pays like a tax on their land and it gets redistributed and you can keep on playing. It wasn't that fun because you just kept on playing. It goes round and round. The landlord version was the version we now know. So she made it with these two sets of rules so that you could see that when property was much more fairly owned and people paid into a common chest, it worked. And then the landlord rules, it goes completely bust. A company called Parker Games came along, they bought it off her. They actually practically swindled her out a bit, but that's a side story. They bought it off her, they took away the prosperity rules, they only used the landlord rules, they relaunched it as Monopoly. So this is a game that's actually designed to expose the hideous outcomes of raw capitalism, and we all give it to our kids for Christmas. And then when kids play it well, they go, oh, you should go into business. So it's the most shocking training. And did you know in Ireland, actually, I was looking at this, in Ireland they had to open a hotline at Christmas for all the families that were having absolute fallout over Monopoly. They had a Monopoly hotline to give you counselling. So we raise ourselves, and again, we raise ourselves playing vicious, competitive games. We need to play collaborative games. There's an amazing game. It's not quite as fun as it used to be because it's called Pandemic. It was really fun before, but I bought it for my kids when they were 8. And we played Pandemic, and you play as a team and you try and beat the pandemic. And my twins, who didn't really get on very well, we played Pandemic, and for a week after their birthday, they collaborated. It was amazing. It was really profound. Playing this game changed how they then behaved after, which just shows we train ourselves to be competitive, or we can train ourselves to be collaborators, and we will carry that spirit with us.
Are we meant to finish at 9:30? I'm having away with it now, but it is 9:30.
There's something I do want to talk about, which is...
Yes, I was going to make sure we gave you the chance to finish. Is it 9:30? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Jess Herbert will tell me off. She'll say, spend 6 hours of Kate at the front. 9:30?
Yeah, it's 9:30, but just...
Yeah, great.
Can I bring one thing? So,
Please do. This
so
is a really good ending.
okay, I'll give you a really good ending. I've got to bring out my little cardboard here. So if I'm going to pretend you said to me, what about business, Kate? Can business be part of a regenerative
Next question.
Go on. So I would bring out my little piece of cardboard. Lots and lots of companies got in touch with me when the book came out, in the same way that local governments did. Banks, actually, Lloyd's Bank said, oh, we'll give you £5,000 to make a little video to put on our website. And I said, thank you, no thank you. It's not a little kind of logo for sale, you know. But lots of companies have got in touch and said, we love this, it could be our logo, this is what... And I often say to companies, I'm sure you're making great products, I don't want to talk about the design of your products. It might be sustainable, it might be paying a fair wage. I actually don't want to talk about the design of this product. I want to talk about the design of your company. I'll stand up for this bit. I want to talk about the design of your company on these 5 design traits, right? The deep design, because how your company is designed ultimately determines what it can be and do in the world. So here are the 5 design traits. And I invite you to think about, it doesn't have to be a company, it can be Brinscombe Mill. It can be a university, it could be an NGO, it could be a local library, a charity, your startup, a multinational. Any organization has a deep design. And its deep design will determine what it can do and be in the world. So what is that deep design? 1, its purpose. So just get an organization in mind and think of it through. Okay, why does this organization even exist? What is its purpose? What is it in service of in the world? Like, why does it really exist? 2, what are its networks? What are its networks? That's its relationships with its employees, with its customers, with its suppliers, with its allies, with its community around. How does it live out its values in all of those networks of relationship? Does it live out its values, or does it become quite extractive? 3, how is this organization governed? Who's even in the room when decisions get made? Who has voice at the table? Some companies, for example, now have future generations on the board, or nature on the board, faith in nature. They were the first company to have nature on the board, represented by Lawyers for Nature. What are the metrics of success? Is it quarterly reports? Is it growing margins, growing profit shares, and growing sales? Or is it actually, are we sequestering carbon? Are we feeding the community? Are we, if it's a company, it needs to make a profit. Otherwise, it's not going to be in business. It can't open its doors next week, next month, or next year. It needs to make a profit. But the point is, the profit is not the purpose. The profit is a background condition, and how much is enough, rather than how much can we possibly make. Let's go down deeper. And I call this the corporate psychotherapy. So the deeper we go, the more profound it gets. So now we've gone purpose, networks, governance. Now we go down ownership. How is this company owned? Is it owned by shareholders or by its employees, or is it owned by the founder for 300 years, or by venture capital, or is it owned by the state, or its customers, or the local community? And all these models of ownership exist, but they have really profoundly differences to what lies at the bottom, which is, of course, finance. Where is the money for this initiative coming from? Is it coming from sales? Is it coming from shareholders and investors? Is it coming from community paying in? Is it coming from a bond? Because where that money comes from really profoundly determines what that money expects to extract and what it's willing to reinvest. And so you've got at the opposite ends, finance and purpose. And we can all think of companies that are actually, whatever it says on their website, the real purpose is to extract the maximum financial return for the owners of the company, whether it be they shareholders or venture capital. That's why it really exists. And that's why everything it does, it cuts corners, and it's going to be greenwashing. And that's what it's really in business for. It's in service to its financial owners. But we can all think of organizations in which they've been designed, the governance and the ownership and the finance, and it's much harder, but it's designed to be in service of its purpose. And I know I haven't been here very long, but I get a feeling I'm in one of those places right now. And that doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, it's much harder, right? And so there's going to be a really interesting story about ownership and about how it's governed and about how it's financed, because it's going to be not the norm out there in the market that's going to make it possible actually to lead with purpose. So all the students I teach, I say, be a detective about the company that you're going to go off and take an employment opportunity with. You know, you're having a job interview. They're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. If you want to go and work for a company that's going to be sustainable and really transform the future, look at its deep design and ask yourself, does this company deserve your skills, your passion, your youth, your energy? Do they deserve you, or actually are they designed in a way that they can never be part of the transformative future? So at Donut Economics Action Lab, when companies come skipping up to us and they say, we want to get in the donut, we present them with this rather challenging framework. This is what we actually want you to look at. How is your company deeply designed, and what would need to change if you were going to be a company that actually is part of a regenerative and distributed future? And we love working with startups, with employee-owned organizations, with community-owned organizations, with places that are owned and governed and financed differently, because you know that that is going to open up the possibility for actually being a different kind of business. That's what I wanted to say.